Hello Giants fans, welcome to Giants Baseball 101. I'm Gabe Vaughn, your host. The background looks a little bit different today. I've been kind of having some issues, with the light burning out and all that. And by the way, the last video, it ended up getting such a goofy picture of my face and it just looked so bad and so stupid that, guess what? I deleted it. So, other announcement here is just a bit of a schedule change. I'm planning to really switch to the morning in posting these videos, so expect to see the video in the morning from now on, at least for a while, at least temporarily, the video for the Giants game the night before. And a lot of this is just how late the games go at night. It would be a little bit more convenient for me, so that's the only other thing I would mention. We're going to start with the question that was asked. I'm glad that you kind of kept that ball rolling, because that's supposed to be a big part of this. We kind of had a gap that took a little while with no questions, and now I'm glad we have one again. Have you done a video on Bryce Johnson yet? That's the question. Well, yes, I have talked about Bryce Johnson, maybe not as much as I should have. He's an intriguing prospect. He basically killed it in spring training, although I don't think he's projected to hit at such a high average like he hit in spring training. I think that's just considered a small sample size, and he's projected to hit maybe around like 250 at best. Still, I think his speed is going to be highly useful for the Giants. He was not in the starting lineup in today's game, which I'm not sure how the Giants plan to use him, whether he's likely to be a starter or a late inning pinch runner. And I honestly think that second option might be a little bit of a better one. Mathematically, I'm not exactly sure what would be the best output on runs to have a guy like that in your lineup with, where he'll get a lot of at-bats and probably not hit a very high batting average, but when he does, he's a big threat on the bases. Or to have him on the bench and to pinch run in the late innings of a ball game. And the reason I tend to favor the second option is because those runs are just so high leverage that that's the time when one run is more than likely what's going to win or lose the game. So, but Johnson's defense, that's the other thing. It's probably a really good part of his game. I mean, I haven't seen a whole lot of metrics on that, but his defense is probably, that's my guess, that it's really good. And that would be the case too for having him start. And the Giants need defense a whole lot. I think though that their outfield, it's pretty well put in place, and whether they could improve it on defense or not, you kind of have to look at basically your particular opponents. If a lineup is full of hitters who tend to hit a lot of balls, like, it really depends on, I think, pitcher-hitter matchups too, as to how the Giants can best just kind of coordinate their defense. But in general, it's probably Bryce Johnson's role. I probably see it as on the bench for the majority of 2023. But things could change, or he could be, surprisingly hot with the bat. He could do something surprising there that would kind of change all of that. So, I don't know. I mean, Bryce Johnson's an interesting guy. Or it could be that when he has the platoon advantage, he'll be hot. I think the idea here for him is just to maximize his speed, just get the most out of his speed and his base stealing ability. The guy he might turn out to be is like someone like Billy Hamilton. Throughout Hamilton's career, he has not had a lot of power at all, but the ability to get on base enough that while his on-base average was never high, he got on base enough that he did contribute a lot for his team, in terms of just his running and a lot of extra runs there. So whether Bryce Johnson will be the next Billy Hamilton, I think that's really what we're looking to find out. But speed is something I think that's overlooked a lot in baseball, and usually when you see, like in percentages, it's usually not really listed as that much of the game. I mean, I think the last thing I saw, it was a few years ago, but I think it was listed as like 3 to 4% of the game. It's not considered like a whole ton of it, but it can make a huge difference. And the situational, the reality of the situation can sometimes play a big impact. Like in extra inning games, if the Giants have Bryce Johnson available to pinch run as the runner on second, if he can as much as take the extra bag on a single that otherwise the guy would have gotten to third, that the Giants can manage to squeeze some runs out of that. I think it could be huge going to extra innings if Bryce Johnson's the guy on second, because that's an area where the Giants need a lot of improvement. It was like in 2022, it was pretty much like you go to extra innings and you kind of know the Giants are going to lose all along. I mean, they surprised us a few times, but extra innings are certainly not one of the Giants' big strengths. Could it change that if they had speed in the extra innings of a ball game? Yes, it could. That's where Bryce Johnson might come in handy. So I see his role as a bench one, at least for now, and as new information turns out, becomes available, we can kind of revise that prediction. So the Giants lost to the Yankees 5-0 today. Logan Webb, he gave up 4 runs in pitching 6 innings. So this opening day game, it ends in a loss. And Logan Webb's performance, that might be okay, acceptable enough for maybe the 5th starter in the rotation, whoever that's going to be, whether it's been announced yet or not. I don't know it as of right now. But this kind of performance, it's unacceptable for Logan Webb. He's going to have to be like lights out for the Giants in 2023. And this is not a good start for him. You can say a lot about the offense too. We're going to get to that. But Logan Webb, what I mean with him is we can't have a start like this even once every 3 starts for him. He's got to be consistently effective in no uncertain terms. That's just a fact. And the way he pitched today, it is just... it's not good for him, and it's clearly not what we're talking about when we say we got to rely on Logan Webb in 2023. And yes, the Yankees are a good lineup, but that's the thing. Giants pitching has to be effective against the best competition, so I am not encouraged by what I saw today. Now, I don't want us to make more than is helpful out of this first series of the year against the Yankees. I mean, I knew ever since I found out they were playing the Yankees to begin the season. I mean, the schedules, they're available a long time in the back. I usually just don't look at them until they're announced. But, you know, I knew that, and I was prepared for fans just making a whole lot of the first series of the season, and I still expect them to, whichever way it ultimately turns out. But I don't think we should make more of it than is helpful. The first series of a season, it doesn't tell you too much about what the team's going to do. I think if the Giants beat the Yankees, though, it would, I mean, with the Yankees being such a great team and all, it would create a real lasting positive impression for them. But they'd have to come back now, and it's a 4-game series, so I think if they as much as split it, it would create some kind of a positive impression. But Logan Webb, let's just hope that this start was an outlier, because it's not what I expected him to show today, and it's not what we can just safely rely on if we're predicting him to perform this way against his highest level competition. So I don't know what was up. I'm sure we'll see some updates on the Giants website. I'm sure Webb's gonna talk to reporters about what went wrong, but I mean, it was something. He's got to be an ace this year for the Giants, so that's a bit concerning. No runs were scored. Blake Sabol, he did start, and that's good. We're going to get to that. He's got to stick around in the starting lineup. We're going to get to that in just a moment. He had 2 at-bats, after which he was pinch hit for. I can't remember who pinch hit for him. Sabol doesn't have a hit yet today, but give him time. He's had 2 at-bats today. That's not a whole lot to tell. Giants just didn't score any runs today. It was a quiet day for the offense, and I've mentioned that the Giants starting pitching, it's got to be good enough that at least sometimes when the offense isn't doing anything, they've got to be able to carry the Giants through so that they can rally and win in the late innings, whether it's a home run or a sacrifice fly. Giants starting pitching, it has to be able to carry them through some of these days, and that's what Logan Webb, you know, we can say no offensive backing for him and all that, but I mean, Webb wasn't good enough to carry them through. But yeah, the Giants offense, it's going to have to pick up, and this was just one game. They were scoring a lot of runs in spring training, so I guess I was just pretty optimistic about it. And Garrett Cole, he is supposed to be one of the best starters in the game, so if they'll have better luck when they face a lesser guy, we'll have to see about that. But it just wasn't too good today. Lamont Wade Jr. did hit leadoff against Cole, and that, I mean, he's probably going to be the leadoff hitter, at least against right-handed pitching most of the time. He had 3 at-bats today. He didn't get a hit, so I'm still optimistic about Wade's ability to hit right-handed pitching this year. I don't think it's time to say anything definite about that, but if Gabe Kapler wants to put him in the leadoff spot, I'm pretty much fine with that, because I can't really think of anyone else in the lineup who I'd say would be better than him in that regard, but yeah. So just getting to Blake Sabol now, and I want to reference something that Ben Kaspick saw on his Locked On Giants podcast a few days ago. He was talking about Blake Sabol and how it's just the Giants are going to have to decide what to do, because he could be the starting catcher, you know, and push Joey Bart to the bench, but I mean, that outfield spot might not be available for him when Mitch Haniger and Austin Slater return from the injured list. So I want to try to give my thoughts on that. First of all, understand, Blake Sabol has to be in the starting lineup for the Giants if he continues to perform anything like what he was in spring training. This does not apply if his performance declines to average. In fact, this does not apply necessarily if his performance is not at least close to what it was in spring training. If he falls into a slump, forget what I said. But Blake Sabol absolutely must be in the starting lineup if he has the potential to open the season hitting as well as he did in spring training. How is that going to come about? He played left field today. Now there's a difference between catcher and left field. At catcher, it's extremely hard to justify having a guy in there that's just bat first and can't, you know, play defense very well. And Sabol is not known for his defense, certainly not at catcher. And left field, I would think that with his slow legs and all that, he wouldn't be especially known for his defense there. But I really see 3 places you could put Sabol. That's catcher, left field, and designated hitter. Now, whether he's played second base in the minors, I can't quite remember. I may have heard something about that, but anyway, it's hard for me to remember, but he may have. I didn't hear any talk about putting him in the second base position, so I'm guessing he's not seriously major league ready for that. So we'll assume right now that the 3 spots he can go are catcher, left field, and designated hitter. Right now, it's no problem having him in left field, and left field as a corner outfield position, it's totally legitimate to have a guy in there who's a power bat or a high average bat, but not a significant defender. That's what the Giants did with Darren Ruff a lot of the time. I mean, he played first base too, but Darren Ruff was a left fielder a lot of the time, and it worked out well when he was, at least when he was hitting well. When he slumped in 2022, it didn't work out so well. But that's, and Ruff played some DH too, but when he was playing defense, left field was a primary position that he played. That's what the Giants did there, and that's what you can do with those corner positions. They're ideal for the guys who are hit first. And Blake Sabol, he's performed super well at the plate this spring training. So left field, I believe, is the ideal position for him. Now we have to deal, however, with when Mitch Haniger and Austin Slater do return. Does Blake Sabol move to the catcher position? Joey Bart, it just seems like everywhere I look, the projections are not favorable for him. His average was like 300 in spring training, but I guess we have to trust the guys who see farther ahead into the future. We have to trust them. Spring training's like a little over a month. That's not a whole ton of at-bats, and you're really sharing playing time with everybody in camp, not just the 26 players on the roster. So there are not a whole lot of at-bats to judge by in spring training. A lot can fluctuate. So we have to trust the guys who know what they're talking about and predict that Bart is just not going to be able to see the ball this year and strike out a ton of the time. I mean, I'm not saying, don't take this the wrong way, I'm not saying there aren't more favorable predictions. I'm just saying predictions in general are, in general are far more reliable than spring training statistics. We must trust the guys who know what they're talking about, and in general, most predictions have Bart as just a real strikeout victim in 2023, which is not encouraging. So that, to me, there's no way to justify giving Bart the starting catcher job at the expense of keeping Sable on the bench. Now, suppose Bart needs more at-bats. The Giants don't want to give up on him as a prospect. Hey, he's reaching the peak of his career, at least what we hope is going to be the peak of his career. He may need at-bats. If that's the case, he's got to go to AAA to get them and not crowd out Blake Sable's position as the starting catcher. If Sable continues to perform the way he was in spring training, that is absolutely critical for the Giants. If Bart needs to go to the minors, he needs to go to the minors. And I don't think he's out of options at this point. I mean, maybe he is. I don't think he's out of options, so I think that would work out pretty well if it were necessary. But is that the best option? Blake Sable is not too good of a defender at the catcher position. What I've specifically heard is that his throwing arm is not that great. With the larger bases, there are going to be some steals. And I've mentioned Giants' ability to steal bases. It could play a big role for them. What about their opponents? If the opponents steal bases against them, that might just turn the whole other way. Could be just as important to prevent opposing teams from stealing bases. So I don't see catcher as the ideal position for Sable to play. Before we move on, I want to make a quick point. If catcher is the only way to keep a hot, and I mean a hot, not an average, a hot Blake Sable in the lineup, if the only way to do that is to have him play catcher, and I don't believe it is, if that is the only way to keep him in the lineup, then it's got to be done. That kind of offense, it just can't be wasted. It can't be taken for granted. He could be that superstar player in 2023, however unlikely you think it is that he'll maintain that consistently throughout the year. It is possible, and if he were to turn out that way, that's when he'd have to be in the catcher's spot, if necessary, no matter what. If he has to play catcher, he has to play catcher. But there may be other options. If he's in left field, when Mitch Haniger and Austin Slater return, the Giants might be kind of hard-pressed to find that keeping both of them in the starting lineup would be preferable to having Sable in the lineup while playing a position that they're comfortable with him playing from a defensive standpoint. If, say, Haniger was signed for big money, Slater, he's been a platoon player before in his career, and he's had his hot and his cold streak, so this is just maybe a guess with too limited information, but Slater would probably be the guy to go to the bench if necessary, if it were necessary to keep Slater on the bench so that Sable could play and play left field. I honestly think the Giants, excuse me, I honestly think that the Giants would be kind of hard-pressed to prove that that wouldn't be the right call. You'd have Sable in the lineup, playing a comfortable enough defensive position and leaving the better guys to play the catcher spot, but he'd still be contributing on offense. If it were necessary to keep Austin Slater on the bench so that the Giants could be aligned that way, it may not have been according to plan, their previous plan, but it might be the best thing to do. They'd be kind of hard-pressed to prove that Slater would contribute as much as Sable with the bat. I don't know that he would. I mean, if he was hot on the bench, they could think about it a different way. As it stands right now, if Blake Sable, and I mean if he keeps up what he was doing in spring training, if Austin Slater does have to go to the bench, that's probably the right call. If Joey Bart can be a lot better at catcher, and Roberto Perez, he's made the roster. It's probably, I don't expect Perez to be much better on offense than Bart. Maybe. I just don't expect, I think between the two of them, if Sable is in the outfield, I think between Bart and Perez, the thing's going to be to just compare them, offensively and defensively. How do you get the best combination of scoring runs and preventing them? That determines who the opening day, excuse me, no, that determines who the starting catcher is, just as we go into the season. Not who needs to see action. That is what the minors are for. Giants need to squeeze out runs. They didn't do that today, but they need to squeeze out runs as the month of April goes on and get a good start to the season. So I see Blake Sable playing the outfield. I see that as probably the best option for him. And if there isn't room for him to do that, the Giants probably just need to make room. Now, what about having Sable as the DH? That would mean that Jock Peterson would have to play the outfield. Basically, an evaluation of what the defensive cost would be. And Peterson, I believe he's a utility outfielder. Right? Correct me if I'm wrong. I think he's a utility outfielder, so he wouldn't be confined to just one position. So you got to compare Sable and Peterson. Like, does Sable play it a little bit better, even with, you know, the fact that he can't really run and all that? And you know, you compare that just along with the defense you'd have with any arrangement. It's hard even for me to keep track of right now. Or if it wasn't an option to have Sable in the outfield, then, like I said before, you have him at catcher if necessary. The comparison in that case would be between what is worse, Sable's defense at catcher or Peterson's defense in the outfield. Which one's worse? That's how you would define who the DH spot is. I still don't see any need for that. I think the Giants can make room for Blake Sable in the outfield, but the bottom line is true no matter what they need to do. That unless his spring performance declines, he must be in the starting lineup. So back to the Giants game today. I don't know what went wrong. They lost it 5-0, and that was just terrible. The Giants are going to need to kick off a really good start to the season. They're going to have to experiment too with different strategies if the way they're currently doing it is not working. But that offense, it's going to have to find a way to squeeze out some runs, and basically the starting pitching behind Webb, I don't think anyone else was projected to be as good as Webb. It will probably be either Alex Cobb or Ross Stripling who starts tomorrow, and we'll see how whichever one of them does. If guys can rebound, I mean, Alex Wood and Anthony DeSclafani, I think they're capable of rebounding. I just hope it doesn't take them too long to do it, because the rotation is going to have to be good this year, and that's just a basic fact. Thank you for watching. This has been Giants Baseball 101. Please subscribe if you haven't. Keep the comments and questions coming. I'll see you next time on Giants Baseball 101.